That's another huge thing in dealing with hardships, I think, is looking at the hardships that you've had and disappointments that you have and realize how those have benefited you and how those have, shaped you, but also like where they led you down your life.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazza, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL, and today's guest is a Navy SEAL with an incredible story of triumph. His dad, Mike, also a Navy SEAL, was on the show last week. So after you listen to this one, if you haven't listened to that one, go check it out because this is our first legacy family on the show, which I'm super excited about. Today's guest was on SEAL Team 1 until 2011 when he was paralyzed in a parachuting accident, ending his career as a Navy SEAL. He attended VIP Neuro Rehab Center to improve his injuries and became the CEO of the center, and now today sits on the board. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to introduce you to David Charbonnet. David, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. Like I said, you're a first legacy family. I'm curious what it was like to have a dad as a Navy SEAL, because you became one, so it must have had an impact for you.
Yeah, my dad, was always my hero. I thought it was like pretty normal what his job was doing was, I thought everybody in the Navy jumped out of airplanes, scuba dived, shotgun. So I remember being at like the playground and, kids would be like, let's play Army. And I'd be like, let's play Navy. And they're like, weirdo. And nobody knew back then, what a SEAL was. So if I told my friends that he was a SEAL, it was just confusing. Yeah, I obviously looked up to him. He's probably one of the toughest people I've ever met. Stupidly, as a kid, I prayed to God that I would become as tough as him. And I feel like God has tested me in that and answered that prayer. So be careful what you ask for. But he was a very like loving and supportive father. He was tough on me, but I definitely needed it. I think I drove him insane throughout my years, but I'm fortunate that we're best friends still today.
That's awesome. Yeah, he told me he had a rule that my family had too, where if you were to join something like a sport or something, you weren't allowed to quit. To me, it had such an impact because when you start something right away, you're not very good. And by the end of the season, you get to see improvement. But if you quit, you don't get that satisfaction of seeing the improvement. So I don't know, that to me, that really resonated as well. What lessons else did he give you that had that impact that helped you to get through butts?
The big one was not quitting. I've certainly had quitting wired in my brain naturally. I wanted to give up on a lot of sports if I wasn't good at it or wasn't getting my way. That wasn't allowed. Definitely fought him on that, a long time. And but I'm really lucky that that's something that they stressed and that he didn't give up on me. The main thing though was my faith, realizing that, God's in control and all I can do is be faithful and put forth my best effort, and the outcome is already in better hands than mine. So it takes the pressure off of me no matter what I do. And that lesson, certainly helped me in my military career, but even more so in the, life events that I've gone through since. That would be the biggest one that both my parents really instilled in me.
So he mentioned that your mom put you in SEAL Pop. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So as someone that had that, as you just mentioned, quitting you from the beginning, you just wanted to quit things. How was it for you going through SEAL Pop and not quitting, not being able to quit?
Well, SEAL Pup is not like a test. It is more, it's just a fun camp really for the kids of the active duty guys. I don't even know if they still do it, but back then, we got to like play in the pool with the boats and stuff and like shoot blanks on machine guns and sleep on the beach in the tents, run around on the obstacle course, which was all super fun. Two things probably really benefited me from that was one, I was around a lot of SEAL instructors during that were very nice to me, and that they were just guys, and so that I'd never had this fear of instructors when I did arrive that they were anything more than just regular people. I also look back on that when we would show up to the O course and SEAL training, and everyone's like, "Oh God, we get to do this. And I'm like, remember when we all wanted to come here like for fun? And now we get to do it every week. And we get to do all the things that we've been like, wanting to do so badly. Really all of SEAL training. I mean, people don't realize that it takes a lot to get a shot to go. Me especially. I was colorblind. I tried to join once. I found out I was colorblind, and I tried to weasel my way through it with some, waivers and stuff, and it ended up not happening. And so in 2006, they actually wouldn't let me do training, and I got out of the Navy. And then I had to, trick my way back in. I tried to cheat the test. I would wear a red lens contact in one of my eyes that would help me pass the color vision test. But in order to pass the regular vision exam right before it, I had to learn to hide it behind my eyeball. So I would roll it
Oh
behind my
my.
eyeball when they would look in my eyes, and then I would roll it forward when I would do the color vision test. And so I did better on it, but I still didn't pass. I didn't pass. So it didn't work, but it's like kind of a funny story. Um, yeah.
That's hilarious.
Eventually, a SEAL that tried to help me the first time that I was in the Navy became the Admiral of Naval Special Warfare. He was also colorblind, Vietnam era guy, and when became the Admiral, he was like, "I'm the boss now. Join up. We can do whatever we want." So thanks to Admiral Benelli, I got my shot, so I got to go. But long answer is it's a privilege to get to attempt to go. All that being taken away from me the first time really opened my eyes to how lucky I was to get to be there. And so it kind of changes your perspective.
It's funny that you're like such a fighter in terms of like, I knew I wanted this, like I'm going. But when you were younger, it was more like, I guess like, was it the whole quit of because just things were just hard and challenging and like you weren't sure if like you liked it versus I have a passion, like this is what I want, so I am going to do everything I possibly can to get there.
Yeah, one thing that really changed me was when we moved to Texas, I ended up with a very tight group of friends that I played sports together. I was in school with them, Bible study, everything. And they're still my best friends to this day. But we were very hard on each other. We ruthlessly teased each other and bullied each other. And I mean, we're like brothers. And there was no room for being a wuss, and it really shaped me. And I was really lucky to have them. It held me accountable too. I didn't drink or do drugs because none of them did. And I didn't want to do that and let them look down on me. There was an accountability we all had that we didn't ever really speak of, but we just had a standard that we all knew we had, that we were tough and that we were going to do the right things. We did a lot of like, you know, rambunctious things, I guess, vandalism and, just regular boy stuff. But we're like, hey, we're not, doing really bad stuff. So, but it really shaped me to like not be a quitter, just not to like let discomfort be something that holds me back. I've always been really stubborn and want my way. So the weaseling to get back in the Navy just kind of came natural, especially after they told me I couldn't do it. Then I really wanted to do it. Um, I honestly joined in 2006. I graduated in high school in 2004, and I didn't even go to my graduation. I showed up after it was done, and just to hang out with my friends. And everyone's asking what college people are going to and stuff. And they're like, "What are you going to do, David?" On the spot, I just was like, "Well, I guess I'll just join the Navy and do what my dad did." And that's how I decided to join. And at that time, it took a while to get in. You don't get in right away when you sign up. But when I showed up in 2006, most of the SEALs that were around were combat veterans that had seen a lot of action in the events after 9/11, whether it be in Iraq or Afghanistan. Being around them really instilled in me a duty to serve my country in that capacity. One event that really kind of lit a fire in me was when the Admiral of Naval Special Warfare came out to Great Lakes to talk to the recruits and see kind of that part of the pipeline. He gave us a little talk and he was like, "Hey, I need Naval Special Warfare is an important part of what we're doing right now as a military, and I need guys. I need you guys to be those men that are going to make it." And I thought to myself, I was like, I know I can do this. I felt a duty to do it because I could. When I came back I mean, I really felt a duty that I needed to serve my country the second time. The first time I joined, honestly, because I had nothing going on in my life, but it was that kind of being around the SEALs that really had served that instilled in me that duty.
How did you keep the faith that you were going to be a SEAL when essentially medically, because of your eye, that was preventing you and it wasn't something that you could like wave a wand around and fix? So how did you keep that faith and that fight in you to get that shot?
I don't know what it was in me, but I was determined to keep trying. And I pretty much had everybody tell me, God has closed that door in your life. You need to think of something else. And I did, kind of passively while I was trying to get back in. I was going to school and did some work in like the, oil and gas industry and really just did not like either of those options. And I don't know what it was that kept me going to it. I remember saying, to somebody that, when they were like, oh, that was a sign for you to like move on to something else. I said, well, I think God wants me to keep trying. If he wants me to do something else, he'll shut the door very, very clearly. Like there'll be no way. That was kind of my mindset. There was a lot of, I did have doubts. I was like, maybe that was him closing the door. That's a pretty definite, like when you're colorblind, that never changes. It's genetic. So I was like, I was like, I don't know if it's ever going to happen. But I also didn't have a whole lot going on. I had a humongous fear motivating me that I was going to end up just being a loser. And I didn't have, anything going for me. And so I really didn't want that. I wanted to do something specifically to make one of the motivators is something to make my family proud. I had been a screw up in school. The only thing I really liked and tried hard on was sports, but I wasn't a great athlete that was going to go to college or anything like that. I just wanted to do something to make my family proud, and that was like the main motivator, I think.
So when you got that opportunity and you were there and you got to buds, like how did that feel for you?
It was pretty awesome. I was very excited to be there. Like everyone, I think I was questioning whether I was going to make it or not. You have to be lucky to make it through. There's so many, injuries are a huge thing. There's just a lot of things that can happen to you. And so I was just like, man, I hope I make it. But like I tell guys that are going through training now, I said, God will shut the door if you're not supposed to be here. He's got a lot of ways to do it. He can bail you on things. He can break your legs. He can you can get super sick and get rolled out of your class. Like there's a lot of ways for God to get you out of this training. Your job is to stay in until he shuts that door. And so that was kind of my mindset. I was just going to do it and see if I can. I remember one of the instructors were hassling me and they were like, why do you think you could be a SEAL? And I was like, I don't know if I can. And he was like, what? And, they were kind of didn't like that answer. And I was like, I'm here to find out. And he was like, oh, I like that answer. I was like, I don't know if I can, like, I don't know yet. I think that was probably the only honest answer anyone's ever given.
It reminds me of I was in fifth grade and we had this drug program called DARE. And the police officer comes in, they do this whole thing for like the whole semester. And then at the end, in order to graduate, they go up to you and go, are you ever going to do drugs? Right. And then like everyone's like, no, no, no. And it gets to me and I go, I don't know. And they go, what do you mean after what you just did? I go, well, in 5 years from now, the peer pressure, I don't know. And they were just like, and they were like, we need you to say no. And I'm like, I don't know if I can make that commitment. And, it was funny though, because I didn't drink until I turned 21. So it was just like so funny because ironically, I think I was the only one out of everyone that said, no. But
Yeah.
that's so funny. So did you find as a legacy that it was harder or easier? Were they tougher on you? Did they know you were a legacy? Did you know any of them when you were there?
I didn't know any of the instructors from my dad's era or anything like that. They did ask when we started training if anyone had family in the teams, and my roommate also had a dad that was in the teams, and he rose his hand, and I didn't, and I was like, "You're an idiot. You shouldn't tell him." They didn't really do anything with that information. They just wanted to know. And so I'm going through first phase, and I'm like, my name's Charbonnet. They almost never said it. And if they did, they said it wrong. They'd pronounce it a different way, Charbonnet or, Charbonnet or something else. And so I'm like the gray man, which is like what everybody wants to be, where like
Yeah.
instructors don't notice you for anything good or bad. You're kind of just a guy. And so going through Hell Week, and my dad came out to San Diego and was like walking around, watching evolutions when he could find the class, run around Coronado. And I would see him off in the distance, like on base and stuff. And it was kind of cool. It like motivated me knowing he was around. But one day, I think like Wednesday lunch or something, we're in line to get
Is
food.
this we're in Hell Week still?
Yeah, in Hell
Okay.
Week. And so
Okay.
I've been awake for a couple days now, and I look and he's at the he's like at the galley. There's like a little like chairs out in the outside, and he's talking to one of our instructors, and I'm like, dude, that's like a little bit risky. And so I just thought, I'm like, he knows what he's doing. He's not going to give up any information. And so we go eat, and then we had like med checks that day. And when I come out of med checks, they strip you down, check you, make sure you're all put together all right. And then so I'm putting my clothes back on, and while you're getting dressed, there's instructors hassling you and throwing water on you and stuff. And the rest of the class is out getting messed with out on the beach as everyone filters in. And so I'm getting my time like my boot or something, and the instructor comes up behind me. He's like, Charbonnet. And I was like, oh, he just said it right. And then he's like, what do you think your dad's doing right now? And I was like, oh man, there's no way. I was like, he doesn't know. And so I was like, couldn't tell you. Bull crap. And then so he starts like hammering me, and so then, I'm like, oh man. And then my like tired mind, I'm like, maybe only he found out. So I'm like running to the beach now. And when I get out to the beach, the instructor that was talking to my dad has a picture of his Buds class. And he's like, whoever can answer this question doesn't get, doesn't have to hit the surf. Whose daddy is in this picture? And I was like, oh no. So they're like working us because they're like, why is your dad following us around? Like, I don't know if they were just messing with me or not, but they were like basically like blaming me, saying like I was giving them information of where we were going to be and stuff, which is impossible. So they're like, I better not see him again. If I see him again, you're going to pay the man. And I'm like, I can't do anything. He's got access to the base. Like he can do whatever he wants. And so anyways, like we better not see him again. They're like, hit the surf. So the whole class runs over the berm, and we're on base. So it's like empty beach. So we run over the berm, and there's one guy on the beach and it's my dad walking down the beach. And so I'm like sprint out to him, and I'm like, take off my hat so he can recognize me. And I'm like, they know who you are. Get out of here. And the whole rest of Hell Week, it was just like, where's your daddy? And like messing with me more. Those last couple of days were harder because he was a legacy, but for the most part, it didn't make a big difference. I mean, everybody kind of teased me about it after that. Like during life saving is basically instructor fighting in the water, and so they usually like. I'm pretty good. I grew up a waterman. Obviously, my dad was a SEAL. He was on the swim team and stuff. I grew up surfing and doing all that sort of stuff. I'm pretty good in the water, and I knew I was better than most instructors in the water. So they were like all like, "Oh, I got Charbonnet. His daddy's not here to save him." So I worked a couple of instructors pretty good for that. I teased him about it because it was funny that what happened was the instructor's talking to him, and he was like, what are you doing around my class? And my dad was like, oh. And he was like, I'm just here for the SEAL reunion, which is a good cover, except for the first thing a SEAL says when they're like identified as another SEAL. They're like, what class were you? And so he didn't tell him his name. He just said Mike, but then he said his class number. And then all they had to do was match the names and the class number, which
Yeah.
I tease him for like, getting busted. But he was like, hey, the rest of your Hell Week was way more memorable because of it, which is true. So yeah. And it
Nice.
was pretty cool. When I got secured, usually they like lock you in the barracks to like sleep for, 24 hours or something before they let you out into the world. But one of the master chief like asked for my dad's number to call him and say, it's done. So I gave him a number, which wasn't my dad's number because I was tired. I accidentally gave him my number. And so when I got to my phone, I had a voicemail, and he had all these nice things to say about me on the voicemail. I thought was hilarious. But then out of instinct, I pressed the delete button, which you normally do, when you had a voicemail back then. And I was like, ah, dang it. Like, but yeah, me and my dad went and got a burger at Hodad's afterwards. And I was like falling asleep in the truck and stuff. So pretty cool memory. Good experience. Sounds like you did something similar that really I think you treasure also as something that really benefited you as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's nothing like what you did. Mine was like an hour. I mean, like I did 2 months in the training, but for what I experienced, it was like an hour of what you experienced, like but for me, it was the hardest thing I ever done physically, mentally, emotionally. And the fact that I kept coming back, like I kept going back, hated every second of it. Not one part was fun. And yet I found myself showing up every day to the training. Every time we had training, I'm there. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, why are we here? And yet I think it was that no quit. I just like, especially from my parents, it was like, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror knowing that I didn't show up just because it was hard. That was it. That was the only thing that kept me going back. I do have a question. Did your roommate that's father was also a SEAL, did he make it through?
He did.
He did.
Yeah.
Okay.
He had a
Well,
long, successful career.
oh
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, what I want to know too, what you mentioned, you had that no quit, in you during the buds, as you were mentioning, but you said there was doubt. Like it was like I didn't think about quitting per se, but you said there were some doubts on can I do this? So how did you conquer those doubts?
You just have to keep moving forward to find out. It's not so much as conquering. It wasn't really doubts. It was just wondering, what my future held, not knowing what it was going to be. All I could do was keep moving forward towards the goal, just find out if it was going to happen or not. You play a game, you play a football game or whatever, you're not guaranteed going to win the game. And you got to move forward and try your best. And if you lose, it's not failure per se. You can do your best and still lose. The other team can do better. You can't find out what's going to happen unless you play the game. And so all I could do is play the game and see what God had in store for my future. And, fortunately, I got to experience all of SEAL training and go through in one shot. So,
So you didn't get rolled at all. You went through one shot.
no, not a
That's awesome.
filthy rollback.
Well, your dad did say you were made to be a SEAL. He said you have that in you. And what I want to know from what he said is, what do you think you need to have in you? Like he said, like you were made to be a SEAL. So what do you think you have that made you the SEAL?
I don't know. I did see that in myself. I realized that, a lot of people kind of just saw me going towards that kind of path in life just from being in high school and being, people don't really understand SEALs are, professionals and they're not just like crazy people. And so in high school, I was kind of nuts and just like, they were like, oh, yeah, he's gonna be a SEAL. So, but I was kind of like born and bred for it, I was around it a lot as a little kid, so I didn't have a whole lot of fear, or aura around being around the base and the instructors and all that. Like it's just a job. It's a fun job and it's the weirdest application process I think on earth. But, it's just a job and those guys are just regular people. I used to always really like be perplexed and like kind of wish that I had it. My dad had this confidence that not like an arrogance, but like just things didn't bother him. He wasn't worried about being embarrassed or like, not doing well at something. He just didn't care about that stuff. He seemed fully like comfortable with who he was. And I definitely wasn't growing up. And I always was like, man, like, I wonder if I'll ever be like that. And I think I learned in buds that you just start to like not care. Like you just like have no, it's not like your confidence goes up. It's just like your opinion of yourself goes down to where you just get treated like crap that you're just like, what, whatever. Like once you learn, like it's kind of like the sticks and stones can't hurt me sort of thing, like, or words can't hurt me, or I forget how the saying goes, but you realize like, everything's gonna be all right. It like doesn't really matter. And so you start to realize like I can handle a lot more, and I think everybody, does experience that hopefully in life, just from the bumps and bruises you get as a kid and then, as an adult, everybody goes through hard things. Everybody. We're guaranteed that you're going to go through hard things. And I firmly believe that almost everybody goes through things way harder than buds just naturally. If you're a parent, I think you do. So I've been through way harder things than buds now, and that was just kind of training for what the future held for me.
So before we get into more of the future and what happened with you, do you have a doubt story on when you were in buds that you overcame and what happened to you?
I really didn't have like a real like crisis in my mind of like wanting to quit, other than every time the alarm clock went off. And like I like in high school, my parents like literally would drag me out of bed every single day. I never like woke up myself. Even in the teams, actually, my roommates would have to wake me up to like go to work because I just am like not a wake morning person. I used to say like if they would bring the bell into my bedroom and let me quit and let me go back to sleep, I would have quit. But I would lay there and I'd be like, oh, screw this, man. This is like, I don't want to be up right now. And like go get in the ocean at like 5 in the morning, and I would just lay there and I was like, if I quit, I'm still gonna have to get my uniform on. I'm still gonna have to go to the office, tell them I quit, then, process out. Like it's gonna be a whole thing. So I'm gonna get up, might as well like do what I want to do, what I came here to do if I'm gonna be up. So that was the only time I really was like, screw this, I don't want to do this. But the rest of the time, I always had this feeling of what else are you gonna be like you have nothing else to do. Like I don't have like rich daddy that's got like a law firm that he's looking to like have me take over. There wasn't like other things that I had going on in my life. So I was kind of like
You didn't have a fallback.
no, I felt like I had all my eggs in that basket. And
Mhm.
I always had really admired people that like did have a lot of options that pushed through it. And I've witnessed a lot of people that truly are tough that like, didn't seem to affect them mentally and physically like it did. Hell Week mentally really messed with me. Like apparently I just the lack of sleep really was difficult. I was falling asleep constantly, towards the end of that week and was irritating a lot of people because I kept falling asleep. So but yeah, I don't have a story really of me like
That's
fight off doubt really, I guess, but just the overall throughout all the training, I just had this like feeling that I didn't have an option. Like in Hell Week,
right.
you'd be running down the beach with your boats on your heads and just being like, God, I'm so tired. Like I just want to lay down. And you'd look and you'd see in the barracks, you could see some of the windows. The barracks are empty when you start Hell Week, but some of the rooms now had their lights on with like doors or windows open, meaning like guys had quit and now they're sleeping in their room or whatever. And I would look up there and be like, oh, I bet that's so nice. And I was like, I wish I could do that. Like I wish I could go in there, but I don't have that option. So like I just didn't see it as an option to quit. Like I figured like SEAL training already when I was going into it, they're gonna tell me when I'm not allowed to do it anymore. Like they're gonna tell me, medically, you're not allowed to do it, or like, hey, he's not cutting the standard and something. That was like my mindset was like that was the way that they were gonna boot you out, because like who quits during a job interview? They just the interviewer tells you you're not going to get the job.
That's
So
a really good perspective. Yeah, I didn't even, that's a really good perspective. Like you're in a job interview throughout the long job interview and the intense job interview. Yeah, that's
yeah.
so then you make it, right? Which I'm sure was an amazing moment for yourself and also for your dad. I'm sure, right?
Yeah, one of the I guess a kind of cool story. So when I got dropped from training the first time, supposed to go to the office, like they're gonna take my card and like I'm out of the Navy and I'm like call my dad. I was like, I can't believe I have to do this right now. I was like, I can't believe it. I was like, I thought this is what I was supposed to do. And he was like, well, go tell them they made a mistake. And I was like, I can't do that. He's like, just go march into the CO's office and tell him. I was like, I can't do that. And he's like, you're about to be out of the Navy in like half an hour. What are they gonna do? And I was like, all right. So I hung up the phone. I went to Bud's and marched right into the CO's office. And like the guy at the front desk was like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And I just like went to open the door and I was like, I got to talk to the CO. And he was like, well, he's not here. Just the XO's here today. And I was like, well, I have to talk to him. He's like, well, you got to schedule an appointment. And I was like, well, I'm about out of the Navy in like a couple minutes. So I got to talk to him right now. And the guy was like, oh my God. So he like went interrupted whatever he was doing to come out and talk to me. And he came out. I won't say his name because I don't know if he wants to be mentioned, but he was like, he was very nice once, or sympathetic once he realized, like, I was like, hey, this is my life. I was like, give me a shot. I can't leave without knowing I came in here and tried. And he was like, that's commendable. He's like, but take that determination somewhere else. And so I was like, all right. And I left and got out of the Navy. So then fast forward, I'm going through training and then I make it. The graduation's on the grinder and my dad and my mom are there. And my dad sees this guy, this commander, and they know each other. So they're like, hey, and he's like, you remember that guy that came into your office and you told him to take his determination somewhere else? He's like, yeah, yeah. He's like, that was my son. He's like, what's he doing? He's like, well, he took it to SEAL Team One. And so it was kind of a cool, like, round the
That is a
full
really
circle
cool
moment.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. Yeah,
But
that's
my
amazing.
dad, they allowed him to pin me, which was a cool moment. And so, he got to put the trident on my chest. And then we had a really awesome program back then, a mental toughness classes that they would do in first phase to kind of like help, give you advice on like mental toughness techniques. And we covered a lot of things, but one of the things was a mantra, or like, and visualization. And so one thing, I couldn't think of a mantra like to kind of tell myself to motivate me, when I needed help or whatever, but I would visualize. I had like a mental picture of me giving my trident to my mom and like saying, like, I did this to like make you guys proud. And even though I knew they were always proud of me, but so I had that in my head, like, that's going to feel so good that one day, if I can do that, like, I would think about that all the time. I would think about that during training and think about how nice that would be to get to do that. And so when I graduated, I did get to do that. And so I gave my mom, has my trident. And so, or like my original one, that was a special moment, that a goal that I really wanted to do from when I started. And so I got to accomplish that. And so that was probably one of the highlights.
That's really cool. I had mantras each week to get me through the training. And my first one, my dad was really tough guy. Just like one of those guys that's like doesn't understand if you're crying. It's like, what's there to cry about? Like that type
Yeah.
of guy. And I was really nervous the night before the first day. And it was just for me, it was just supposed to be one day, just to see if I could make it through the day. And it was a bunch of guys. I was the only female. I was all nervous. I'm 5 feet and I was under 100 pounds at the time, like just not ready for this. And wasn't able to sleep. And my dad looks at me and goes, what are you so nervous about? You're not wrestling a lion, you're doing push-ups. And I was just like, oh my God, that's my mantra. So every single time, like to get me there and to go, I was like, I'm not wrestling a lion, I'm doing push-ups. And then as I was doing push-ups, till God knows what number we were getting to, I was just like, I think I'd rather take the lion.
Yeah.
but, but yeah, no, I had those little mantras as well. And I'm sure this stuff and going to the teams, I mean, that really helped you, go through those really tough moments. And I want to get to that moment in your life where you had that accident. You had the parachuting accident. I believe it was with 3 other SEALs who were parachuting, right? And it was your second attempt, so your second jump. That's what it was. And then you
Yeah,
ended up
on that
fall,
day. Yeah, we did 2 jumps. So on the second one, was
second jump.
mhm.
And then you ended up falling 80 feet,
Yeah, I mean, I stalled
something
my
like that.
canopy at 80 feet, so I came down pretty quick after that. I was trying to avoid airplane on the ground, and if I maybe been more experienced jumper, I would have, in hindsight, made arrangements earlier in my approach. And but anyways, I got myself in a really bad spot of trying to avoid the airplane, and I was also around a lot of jumpers, but I was going perpendicular to their path, and so I really didn't want to hit anybody in the air because it could, collapse both our canopies and we fall. And I didn't want to kill anybody, other than me that day. And so I tried to turn really easy, even though I knew I was lower than I meant to be. It took me longer to get past the airplane. So I was lower than I wanted. And so I knew I was lower than you're supposed to be when you turn, but I thought I could still do it. The canopy was bigger than the one that I normally use. So they'd come out of stalls slower. And so I turned and like immediately I like hit the ground. It was like I went from like 80 feet to like zero so quick that I didn't have really time to be like scared or anything. I just like threw my legs out and tuck and rolled and kind of ate it. I was like, adrenaline was buzzing at that point. I was all like kind of tangled up in my parachute and like dirt in my mouth and stuff, and my helmet went flying off. And I was like, holy crap, that was like a really hard hit. I was like, God, man, I probably like broke a leg or something because I was just like everything was just vibrating. It felt my adrenaline was pumping. I was actually jumping for fun because I had to do this like Arabic school that I kind of got shafted that I had to do and nobody wanted to do it. My platoon felt bad for me, so they gave me extra time before deployment. So I was going to go meet them. They were already gone and I was supposed to meet them on Monday, but I was jumping Saturday with a couple of my friends that I probably wouldn't see for a while. I was like, oh man, they're gonna be so pissed at me if I broke my leg. And so I'm like untangling the parachute. And then when I looked at my legs, they were laying different than how I thought they were in my mind. And that was like my first indication. And then I was wearing swim trunks. And so I just touched my knee and then I tried to move my foot and I couldn't. And I was like, oh. So I knew what had happened. And then I just like, laid my head down on the field, looked up at the blue San Diego sky and said, "All right, God, let's do this now." That started the next chapter in my life.
Oh my gosh. Like that is, I mean, how how hard and how long did it take to process? Like, because it seems like it was really quick in terms of like, okay, like let's go into this new chapter. But then you have all these like surgeries, I'm assuming, like you have all this stuff that's going on, and everything's completely out of your control and your career's over and you have to go through a whole new direction. So how mentally, what was going on? Take us there.
Well, I was pretty stoic, early on, maybe like the first 10 days. Had emergency surgery the next morning. I was in probably the most pain that I had ever been in. But after the surgery, my back felt pretty good because I was in so much pain that even the post-surgery pain was like minor compared. But for 10 days, I was like in the ICU or whatever. And before they moved me to the VA like rehab hospital, it was just like a surreal moment. It was like, it was almost like I being like a witness at your own funeral though. It was very strange. Like for one, when as soon as I like realized I was paralyzed and like laid down on the ground, it was like the whole like visual, my whole like imagination of what my life was going to be like in the next 20 years of my career and who like what I was going to be and what I was going to do with my life just disappeared. It was like that person died. And then it was like an empty path that I had no idea what was going to be on. And so it was like watching myself die and in the ICU. And I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of people that really care about me. And so I had a lot of people just coming by the hospital, like, being over my bed and be like, "Oh man, Dave, are you all right?" And being like really upset. And, it was just really weird. It was like weird. It was like watching people come by my casket or something. And I'm really thankful for them. It was really encouraging too, but like it was also like, this is so weird. So I was like doing all right, because I wasn't really thinking too far ahead. Kind of two things really sent me down into like a spiral up. I don't remember how many days after, but I was still in the ICU. I started having very intense pain in my legs. It was unbearable. And there was no amount of medication that they could like shoot me up with that seemed to do anything to it. I was losing my mind, like, and it was just not never ending. It just went on and on and on all night. And that started being like a regular occurrence, like every night, and sometimes during the daytime. I couldn't believe how bad it was. And you'd look at your legs and there's nothing wrong with them, but it feels like someone's like snapping your bones. And it's like, so amputees get what's called phantom limb pain or phantom pains. And paralyzed people sometimes with an injury that's similar to mine can get, they call them like neuropathic pain, but it's basically just like your nervous system freaking out. And it feels like, all these bad things are happening to your legs. It's not. So that was one thing that made it very difficult to stay positive. But then also I went to the rehab hospital, and they teach you how to get in and out of a wheelchair and like all that stuff and make sure you're fine with that. And then when you went home, like I was just dying to get out of the hospital, like go home. And when I went home, that was like when it really, really hits you, like, oh my God, this is my life now. It took a long time after that. Then it just started going downhill. I really struggled with the nerve pain. I really struggled with losing my job, my purpose, what I felt like my purpose in life was. It was just took me to a dark place that I didn't think that I would ever be at. Fortunately, I was able, my parents, encouraged me to like, force myself out of it. Finally, it was like you had to hit rock bottom, but I was just constantly thinking about dying or like, well, killing myself. And I was like too scared to kill myself, thank God. But I would think about it just all the time. It's just one night I having nerve pain. I'm like at the end of my rope. And I had broken up with my girlfriend at the time. I just cut myself off from everybody. That girl I eventually married, her name's Janet. I called her that night and I said, one night when I was just like at my bottom, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't take this. I was like, I just like my faith, I like pray for help, and I just don't feel like anybody's there, and I don't know what to do. And she was like, after we hung up, she called me again. She's like, come outside. She was like on the street, and I went out there, and she was like, even if you don't think God loves you and cares about you, he does. Don't feel like it right now. And so that was kind of like a turning point. And she, at the time, had memorized the book of James, like just wanted to challenge herself. And so the first chapter of James in the Bible talks about like, trials and hardships. And so it was like a perfect thing to have on her mind and ready to go for what I needed. And so that was like, that night I feel like was kind of like hitting the rock bottom and then heading in the right direction. And so that was kind of the beginning of getting better, I guess. And that was around a year post injury. I would say that was when that night happened. I remember an older guy at the VA was like, takes about 2 years to like come to terms with this. And I was like, 2 years? I was like, you wuss, like I'm gonna be good with this in like a month. And but it took about 2 years. He was right.
Wow. So tell us how you continued to go up when you, I'm sure, had some moments of going backwards, but when you went backwards, you didn't allow yourself to go all the way down to the bottom.
One thing that I learned in Hell Week, and you probably experienced this too during, just evolutions. It doesn't really matter how long it is. Like, but when you're going through something, it eventually becomes normal. And Hell Week around Tuesday or Wednesday, like it doesn't get any easier, it just keeps getting worse. But you've accepted that this is your life. You're like, this is what I do. I don't go to sleep anymore. Like I run around getting chafed and cold. But you like all of a sudden it becomes normal and you're like used to it, even though it's still as hard. You kind of learn to just wait for those moments when you're going through things, like whether it's, being paralyzed or having nerve pain, having kids and being, overwhelmed by, being a parent. Like if you wait, like that will become normal. My dad used to tell people that the people that make it through SEAL train are procrastinators. They just keep putting off quitting till the next day. It's kind of true. Like If you just wait, you're probably not going to feel the same way that you're guaranteed not going to feel the same way you feel right now. And so if you feel like quitting right now, just say, okay, I'll quit, in a little bit later. Or, and just in life too. Like if you feel like you can't handle whatever your situation is, just wait because later you're not going to feel that way. But when you start, not being in the moment and thinking about, well, what if I don't feel different? What if, and start thinking way too far ahead. That's when you can really derail yourself. It's the whole like Zen thing of just being in the moment is like it's like a real thing. It's a hard thing to do to be present, but I don't know if they told you this, but like one of the most common like strategies for getting through Hell Week is to get to the next meal. Like if you try
Yeah.
to make it through the week, like that's an insurmountable task.
Yeah.
But I can get to breakfast or I can get
Mm.
through this one evolution. Like Hell Week's not that hard. Hell Week is a bunch of stuff that you've already done, but they just you just do it back to back to back. You got to only handle what you're doing at the moment and wait. One of my buddies in Hell Week, I could tell he was struggling and he just popped up one day and was like, all right, I'm done. I'm out. And I was like, whoa. I was like, just wait. And he was like, wait for what? And I was like, wait till you don't want to quit anymore. And he was like, that's not going to happen. And he ran off. And I was like, and so he didn't make it. But I was like, man, if he just stayed, like probably tomorrow, he would have not felt the same. You can apply that to like, any challenge. The harder the challenge, the harder it is to believe that. There are days that I still have nerve pain that is, I mean, it brings me to tears. I don't think that I'm the toughest guy in the world, but I go probably experience more pain than almost I'm willing to bet almost anybody I talk to on a daily basis. And sometimes I don't know how long it's going to last, and I'm like, oh God, T, like I don't know if I can do this. And I have those thoughts come through my head, and you just have to remind yourself like it will be different later. It may be painful still. It may be like less. I might feel better, but it will be different. That strategy you can take anywhere you go.
So when did you, as you mentioned, like 2 years going through, when did you start to find your new purpose?
There's like stages, I guess. So I was going to this place called VIP Neuro Rehab Center, which the SEAL Team One PT found and said that I should go there because it's specifically for like rehabbing spinal cord injuries and strokes and cerebral palsy and stuff like that. So I was going there, and that was pretty much what I did every day. I just goes there, do my session, come home, sleep, whatever, and rest. And it kind of became my whole life. About 2 years in, the guy that was running it, Dr. Marcus, he needed to leave and like take care of his parents, and he's like, I need somebody to run the clinic. It's like, well, I have never ran a PT clinic. And I've also never run a nonprofit. So like I don't know any side of this business. He's like, oh, you'll figure it out. And he's like, also, it's going out of business. So if you don't do it, like it's gonna, if you crumble it, like, so be it. I tried to do it. It took me like a week to realize I needed help. I told my wife, I was like, you want to quit your job and we can both be volunteers at this clinic. And so, yeah, because they couldn't afford to pay anybody to do the job. Fortunately, I was getting money from the Navy as my retirement. And so we prayed about it and we took it on. And I would say, my wife was probably the biggest part of like, she did a lot of grant writing. She got a couple grants. We partnered with other groups like my dad's organization, Beyond the Teams, to do events. And my good friend, Chad Wright, did a fundraising effort on his, YouTube platform that, raised $250,000. And so 9 years later, we could afford to pay somebody for that director position and replace me with a real person. And one of our managers, who just has a real good heart and a passion for the people that he works with, and even has experienced a spinal cord injury himself when he was younger. We asked him to take over the director job, and so Brian is our new director. And being there for other people that were going through, what I was going through at that time was kind of like that new that new kind of purpose, the new chapter, or so I felt, so I thought. And, eventually it was time to move on, and Brian took over. And so he's the director now. I'm still involved with the board and fundraising, but it was kind of like, now what? I started to kind of feel that feeling again of like, what's my purpose in life, And a friend of mine from church, he just got out of the SEAL teams, and he was like, hey, I want to start a Bible study for the Buds guys. And I'd kind of like put SEAL team in the rearview mirror. At the beginning, it was too painful to be, to think about it a whole lot. And I was fine with it now. And so I was like, yeah, I'd be down to help with that. And over the last couple of years, we've gotten to mentor a lot of young men that are going through SEAL training. And I call them my kids. They're like half my age now, but it's a real purpose. And I've gotten to be there for guys that are going through some real hard things, not just Bud's hard things, but like real life hard things like deaths in the family and deaths from teammates. Getting to be there for those guys and have my experiences of the bad things that have happened in my life, the really hardships, like I wouldn't get to be there for them if that all hadn't happened. We talk about it all the time, like that God, sometimes uses your strengths, but more times he uses your weaknesses. When I broke my back, the day of October 14th, 2011, I was, 200 pounds. I could run, a sub 6 mile, like any second I wanted. I could lift however much weights. Like I was a trained killer. Like I was, by definition of like the world standards, I was strong. Boom. In one day, I like can't even reach the top shelf in the grocery store. I need help with like everything. Like I'm now like by any definition weak. There's a lot I can't do. Like I am like weak compared to that person that I was on October 14th, 2011. And I feel like I'm more useful now. I've had more purpose now than I did back then. All the things that have led up to now, all the hardships have kind of built the person that I am. But it's also led me down the path that I went. I don't know if I would have married my wife. I don't know if I would have my kids that I have now. Those things I wouldn't trade for anything. And that's another huge thing in dealing with hardships, I think, is looking at the hardships that you've had and disappointments that you have and realize how those have benefited you and how those have, shaped you, but also like where they led you down your life. One of our kids that is going through training, he got rolled for something, and that'll delay his graduation date. It will also probably change what team he gets assigned to. It'll change what cycles of deployments he's on. It'll change who he sees and when he sees them in life. It'll probably affect who he marries. It'll probably affect the kids that he has. It'll change, and in 60 years, he might look back at that time and be like, thank God that I got rolled that time, because it has made my life how it is. And so it's kind of important to like look back at that and see what's in play, and the disappointments that happen in your life. It's okay to be disappointed about them, but also see them for what they are. And it helps you be able to accept disappointments when they happen and realize that they can be huge blessings.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I want to know then, as a wrap-up question, what do you got for us to develop that mental strength to like tackle all the hardships that are coming our way?
I'm like really big on like creating good habits. I was somebody who didn't like any structure or like, routines or anything like when I was younger. And now like I'm all about it because I've realized how good it can be. Our first phase proctor is awesome SEAL and somebody I really looked up to. He said, all I ask is that you do the right thing every single time. And for whatever reason, that like really hit home. I was like, how simple is that? I was like, all I have to do is the right thing all the time, or try to. One example is like when you leave the grocery store and you put all your stuff in the car. It's so tempting every single time. And I think about this all the time when I'm at the grocery store. I'm like, I could just leave the cart right there. I could. It doesn't matter. But the right thing to do is to go put it away, just because it's a habit. And if I don't do it today, it'll give me an excuse to skip it on another day. Like I read my Bible every single day, because if I skip it one day, it'll be an excuse that I can skip it another day. And having those rules set to make good habits, because it's not just about putting away your grocery cart. It's about having a habit of doing the little things right, so that it's not hard. It's not a hard decision to do the big things right when they come. It's just what you do. It's just who you are. You're just a person that makes the right decision. And so it's just like exercising. You do those little things right. It's building that strength to do the harder things right when they come.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being a guest on the show. You were absolutely incredible. And I really enjoyed talking with you.
My pleasure. It's good talking to you too. I hope it was beneficial.
It was more than beneficial. It was amazing. And I hope everyone that's listening feels the same way. And like, I'm going to remind you guys, go listen to his dad's episode if you haven't yet. And don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and become a Patreon member so you get access to our bonus episodes that only our Patreon members get. And I will see you guys next week.